Good evening, and welcome to another episode of History Bluffs, where truth is stranger than fiction. I want to welcome to the show right now your host. It's Chris, everyone. Give it up for Chris.
Hello, there I am. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to another episode of History Bluffs. We are thrilled that you are joining us. And we are out to prove, as Adam just said, that truth is indeed stranger than fiction. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like to pause briefly to give a big round of applause to our tech, Mr. Adam Bellis. So, Adam, thank you so much. We have a very exciting show for you tonight. We have three outstanding historians, and they're going to tell us some stories. They're going to regale us with some stories on a topic. And then we are going to determine which of them are telling the truth and which of them are trying to be tonight's history bluff and fake us out with some non-true facts. But we also have the debut of a new panelist, a judge. It's going to be on the show with our historians, who will be basically the audience liaison and determine for the audience what is happening here in the stories and who's kind of telling the truth. Are they thinking this vibe is more real than that one? And we'll determine that as we go through the show. So, without further ado, please let's welcome our cast. I've already introduced our amazing tech, Adam. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time to meet historian number one, coming to us from Chicago, Illinois, Mr. Carlos. Welcome, historian number one, Carlos.
Hello.
Hello, Carlos. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, but I'm hot. It's hot in Chicago right now.
It's hot in Chicago. How hot in Chicago is it right now?
Oh, it's so hot that we have cooling centers open for people who may otherwise die on the streets.
Wow. Okay. All right. No.
You shouldn't have rim shot them.
No, this should not have been a rim shot. But that's
okay, well, let me take it back. We'll do one of these then.
There we go. I don't know if that's appropriate either, but fine.
Well, I hope you stay cool, Carlos, because in my estimation, you're always cool. But we don't have a whole lot of sympathy for you because down here in Florida, we have that high heat every day, day after day after day. But having said that, I want you to hold that thought because we have more than Carlos on the show. We have coming up next, we have historian number two, Mr. Matt Tremble. Everybody give it up for Matt. Hello, Matt.
Hey guys,
how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. I appreciate your choice of hats tonight, Chris.
Oh, I'm right back at you. Yes, indeed. Slightly different, but of similar family of flat caps. Yes,
they're cousins.
Yes, they are cousins. Indeed.
Flat cap cousins.
Flat cap cousins, which is a little hard to say quickly. Hey, Matt. What is something that you have a hard time saying on day after day? Kind of repeated, especially with your children running around.
If you don't stop that now,
I
will punish you in some way. I can't get the words out fast enough.
Got it. If you don't stop that now, I will blank. All right. Yeah. All right. Interesting.
Or
well, hold that punishment thought because we have more people coming onto the show. So let us now introduce our third historian for tonight's show. And let's give it up, ladies and gentlemen, for Gina DeRoma Hunter. Gina, please join us.
Hi.
So, hello, Gina.
Hello, world. I am
loving the headwear.
I didn't want to be left out. We all had hats. They were fun.
We all do indeed have hats. So yours looks a little, yours looks quite the French, your hat there.
Oui.
So, okay. Yes, indeed. Gina, is there something? Is there a habit that you have that you do on kind of day-to-day frequent basis?
Are we allowed to say this?
Okay, I think we're going to stop right there.
I wasn't being dirty. I was being serious. Like I have weird habits. I have very, very weird habits that are
okay. Well, Gina, I tell you what. Hold that weird thought for a second because we have more joining us on this show tonight. Okay. We have the debut of our first judge in this format. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Darren to the screen.
Yay!
Hello. I judge you. I judge you. I don't like this.
Judgmental Darren is what we call him, and that's why we love him. He judges everything, which is good. It's always good to get critique and good feedback but sometimes he's just very judgy, very, very judgy. Darren, what is something that you may judge, pretty much every day of the week?
Every day of the week, I judge my choices.
Oh, I can relate to that. Judging my own personal choices. Yes, indeed. Carlos, Gina, Matt, and Darren, the reason that I asked those questions is because tonight's topic for the show is daily. D-A-I-L-Y. Daily is tonight's topic. So, ladies and gentlemen, what that means is that our three historians, Carlos, Matt, and Gina, are going to, as I mentioned, they're going to regale us with stories inspired by the word daily. They've been given this topic. They've had some time to do a little bit of research. And I'm going to ask Adam, real quick, to pop up on screen, if you would, the rules of the show.
You got it, Chris. That's not the rules.
There's
the rules.
All right. So as I mentioned, the topic is daily, and our historians have been given the topic. They have 2 additional minutes right now for some last-minute research. They can take notes, and they're going to be taking notes as the other historians are telling their stories. And then Darren is going to hear all of those stories and judge and try to determine who he believes is going to be the history bluff, who's trying to fake us out, and which 2 are telling the truth. So as the rules state, we only can completely lie or completely tell the truth in terms of the premise of the story. You might hear some actual dates and some actual time periods and some actual places and people and things of that nature. That is all fair game, but they have to be telling the premise of the story must be a bluff for that. So, and we'll have 3 different rounds for them to expound on their stories, but each of those 3 rounds will get shorter and shorter and shorter. And we'll explain that as we go through as well. But real quick, it's going to be 75 seconds in the first round, 60 seconds in the second round, and then only 45 seconds to wrap up your stories in the third round. So, having said that, I think we are going to ask all 3 of our historians to give us a thumbs up if they are ready to go with their stories. And we shall begin tonight's episode. All right, let's go. Carlos is ready. Carlos is pumping his fist. We have the music coming here. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for round number 1. And Carlos, since you were pumping your fist together, my friend, I'm going to ask you, Carlos, to start our show tonight with your first round. And once again, Carlos gets 75 seconds to tell the beginning of his story inspired by the word daily. Carlos, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, you would assume that since I'm in Chicago, I would talk about some anecdote regarding one of the dailies, one of the many, the huge political family that ran this town. But I'm not going to do that because daily reminded me of what happens every day, which is days. And days reminded me of daylight savings time. And did you know that there was a period back in the 70s when they tried to stop daylight savings time? First of all, a lot of people are under the misconception that daylight savings time was created for farmers because of farm time. You got to be on farm time because of farmers, blah, 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 we're in the country, whatever. No, it was done in the World War II to save lights or some other such thing. And that was the same thinking again in 1974, because in 74, we were in an energy crisis because that damn OPEC was putting an oil embargo on us. So Richard Nixon was like, hey, we need to get people to do stuff in the daytime, so maybe we should shift hours over so we can use as much power.
All right. Well done, Carlos. Nice. I'm going to turn to our judge, our audience liaison, Darren. So, Darren, we just heard Carlos begin his story inspired by daily, and he's talking about daylight savings time. What's your take so far on Carlos's story?
My take so far is I think Richard Nixon sounds like just an awful, awful name for a spy. And it doesn't make any sense at all.
All right.
But,
yeah.
But yeah, the 74 gas crisis, I think that does have a little element of truth to it. That maybe we wanted to save some energy.
Okay, all right, believable. So far, believable. Gina, any thoughts on Carlos' story, Gina?
Oh, I don't know what is happening just yet. I'm intrigued for the next round, but I can tell you that 2 dicks are better than 1.
Okay. On that note, we'll immediately go over to Matt.
What is wrong with you people?
Nothing at all. Nothing at all. Matt, please let us know your thoughts on Carlos' story, please.
I like Carlos's hand motions.
All right.
So far, I'm in.
Okay. All right. So the hand motions might be pulling you in. Well, Matt, since you're there on screen, what we're going to do is we're going to leave you there, and we're going to have you begin to tell us your story, because we're going to put up the little timer now, and when you hear the boom, you're going to be on the clock to tell your opening round of your story.
All right.
There you go.
Okay. Well, when I heard the topic, I thought of The Daily Show, which I'm a fan of and has been around for quite a while. But in my research, I learned a few kind of fascinating things. Now, as we know, the late night talk show thing has been sort of tumultuous in general between, Leno and Conan and Letterman and crazy. But within The Daily Show itself, there has been some very tumultuous times. But if you guys remember, it started back in 98, I believe, with Craig Kilborn. So Craig Kilborn did 2 seasons, but then he got another offer, what he thought was a better offer, and left The Daily Show. His version of The Daily Show was very different than it is now, much more joke-based, didn't really have much of a perspective on politics, but then Jon Stewart came in. And Jon Stewart added a bunch of elements that we have now, including the field newscasters, such as Steve Carell and Stephen Colbert, who got their start there, including John Oliver, a bunch of people. But the majority of the story has to do with Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert.
Okay. Nice timing there. Just as your buzzer was about to go off, you wrapped up your story succinctly. Let's get, Darren, I'm going to turn back to you and hear your take on Matt's opening salvo of Daily Show tumult.
Well, it was really interesting. He talked about the 4 main late night people at the time was Leno, Conan, Letterman, and Crazy, which I guess he meant Arsenio, or maybe he just was making stuff up. I don't know if I believe that. He did his research.
Okay. All right. Carlos, what did you catch that same note that Darren did?
Oh, well, let's see. I don't know if I got that note that Darren did, but let's see. Leno, Letterman were real topical, real topical stuff we're talking about here. Oh, those late wars, huh? Those 80s late wars. Let's get the night shift on the old VHS player and watch that again.
From the guy whose story is about 1974. Come on.
My story's real. It's okay because my story's real.
All right. Gina, let's come in here, Gina, and get your perspective. What's
He's
your take,
already
Gina?
lying, because if the show was an evening talk show, why would they call it The Daily Show instead of The Nightly Show? Liar, pants on fire.
Well, the Tonight Show was already taken.
Bluffer, roll up your sleeves, you cuffer.
Oh, boy. You had it, then you lost it.
I'm going to stop now.
All right. Well, Gina, you're going to stop that, but we're going to have you begin something else, because it is now time for you to start your first part of your story with round 1, where once again you get 75 seconds. So Gina is going to.
I have to find.
Yeah. Go ahead and organize your notes, organize your paper there. So Gina is going to have 75 seconds to tell us her beginning story of whatever she came up with, inspired by Daily. So Gina, the floor is yours. When you hear the boom.
Okay, I got it now. I'm ready.
All right. Here comes your boom.
Okay, life is infinitely stranger than anything which the mind of man could invent. Sherlock Holmes. That is a quote from him. And the reason that I am telling you this story is that there was a man by the name of Richard Green who had a daily obsession with Sherlock Holmes. He was considered the lead, he was like a historian, and he was one of the leaders in one of the historical societies in England, and he also worked for Oxford. And he infinitely obsessed with Sherlock Holmes. His father was a children's book author, and he had a big, extensive library. And when Richard was a little boy, he found Sherlock Holmes. He was about 9 years old, and he read every single one that he could find. And he discovered that he really enjoyed the logic of everything, and that he related to the character quite a bit. So much so that he actually counted that he noticed that he had 17 stairs leading up to his attic, and he put Baker Street on the door of his attic. And then he actually decorated the inside of his attic, which was like his playroom, to look like some of the descriptions that he read in Sherlock Holmes. That's how obsessed with him he was at an early age of 9 years old. Flash forward to 1983, the man's going to Oxford. He works for the Oxford Press, and he publishes a bibliography based on stories and evidence that he found from the Conan Doyle family, in fact. And I'll tell you more in just a bit.
Okay, all right. Well, let's bring Darren in here. Darren, Gina described what sounds like the early beginning blossoming of a set designer who had an obsession with Sherlock Holmes. What's your take on this?
I like Gina Tudyk's story, but I have to take issue with the description of an extensive, large children's book library, because children's books are very small. And I don't think you could amass enough of them to have an extensive library. And if you did, it would just take days to read the entire library. So I'm finding this hard to believe.
Like as in days, as in back-to-back days, which would be something that's done daily?
Oh.
Yeah, like maybe one day.
One day. Matt, let's get Matt's thoughts. Matt, what's your thought on Gina's story so far?
Gina wears a hat very well.
Okay, enough said. Carlos, what's your take on Gina's story so far?
I just want to be clear. Point of order, Judge, Your Honor, ref, host, whoever. Point of order. I think her connection to Daly is that this person had a daily obsession. I think that's the only tenuous connection between her history and the topic of the day. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Am I the only one taking this seriously? Next, let's go through Conan's history while we're at it.
Okay, all right. Carlos, I think you should take a sip of whatever it is you have in that container there and just relax for a second. Take a breath.
Moonshine.
We are all going to take a breath because we are getting ready to move forward. Now that we've heard all three opening rounds of the first part of the story, we're getting ready to move into round number 2. And as a reminder for our historians and for the folks listening, this second round now, we are going to shorten the amount of time available to the storytellers. It's now going to go down to 60 seconds. So when we bring out you, out and have you begin your second round, you're going to only have 60 seconds now on the clock. And this time we are going to start with Matt. So Matt, please take center stage, and let's begin when your boom comes, when the clock comes on screen. You are going to have 60 seconds to tell us the second round of your story.
Okay, so as I said, this revolves mostly around Colbert and Jon Stewart. So everything went great. Carell and Colbert really made their careers from The Daily Show, doing field reporting and tons of great comedy. They all went off to have incredible careers. But about 2005, I think it was, 2005, yep. 2005 is when Colbert was getting a little bit restless. He'd done everything. Carell had already left to go do new stuff. And eventually, as we know, he's doing The American Office. He wanted to start his own show. Stewart did not want to lose him. He was kind of a linchpin in the thing. But Colbert, he tried to take, Jon Stewart's head writer. They only were like 4 blocks from each other, as studios were. So it was not a great time for either of them. And Colbert's first show, he laid into Stewart basically, subtly, but very meanly.
Ooh, a little tumult indeed. Darren, what say you about Colbert being the linchpin to the whole thing?
Well, I can see Colbert's persona laying into Jon Stewart. His arch-conservative persona, but as himself, I don't buy that. He's too nice of a guy.
And they are very good friends.
And they are good friends now. They even have barbershop harmonies.
They are
together.
now. They are now.
Oh, is there more coming in part 3?
Okay, there may be. There may be
Who's
indeed.
to say?
Who's to say indeed? Carlos, what's your thought on what happened here?
Everybody knows that Carell's career was made by the 40-year virgin in The Office. That's what really set him off into fame. Okay, until then he was just one of the Steves. All right, so that's A. Okay, and until then he was one of the Steves and the husband of that woman that was on SNL. That's who he was. All right, number 2. Colbert's studio was right next door because once they did a bit where Colbert walked right over from his show. Are you saying they made that up for the bit? Come on.
All right, Gina, what do you have to say, Gina? Anything on this?
Well, either Matt's lying or Jon Stewart and those guys are lying because they're being fake. So I don't know what I believe yet, but I know I'm not the liar. So that's all I have to say.
All right. Well, we're gonna bring Carlos back up. Carlos, you are going to have your 60-second portion to expand your story on daylight savings time. Here comes your round number 2, Carlos. When the clock booms, you go.
All right. So Nixon and Congress, everyone, they're like, we got to save power somehow. So this is what we're going to do. From January 74 through October 75, for almost 2 years. All right, we're going to make daylight savings time permanent. So it's going to spring forward, but it's not going to fall back for almost 2 years. And the thinking was we're going to get fuel consumption down because people are going to wake up during the daytime and they won't need the lights up anymore, and they'll fall asleep earlier before the dark, so they won't be in the dark as long. Nighttime, they'll be less time awake in the nighttime. Okay, that was the plan. And 79% of Americans were down because they were tired of changing times like we are now. And then it went into effect. Now, first day, hundreds of tourists missed their flight from Puerto Rico because that flight was on standard time, baby. And that's not the only thing that went wrong. A lot more things went wrong.
And we will hear about that in the next round. Carlos nailed the time right on the money. Thank you for that, Carlos. Let's see, Darren, what do you think about Nixon trying to keep America in the dark? That's a little believable.
That is believable. What's not believable is 79% of Americans agreeing on anything. Like
It was a different time. It was a different time.
Like milk coming from cows, or Puerto Rico being part of America. Things like that. I don't see it.
Good point. Good
also,
point
Puerto
indeed.
Ricans are notoriously late, so I think that they were just making it up.
Okay. All right. Let's see, Matt. What's your thoughts, Matt?
Puerto Rico, Venezuela, Mexico. I can make up words too and say them loudly about light and going down. Do I sound more truthful, Carlos?
Okay. Wow. Very interesting take there, Matt, on Carlos's story. Gina, what's your thought on these two having a little bickering
I just
contest?
want to do this voice. That's all.
And flay your hands. Flay your hands, please. All right. Well,
I'm sorry I'm not part of the Flat Hat Club.
all right, Gina, you're going to have an opportunity to do that voice because you now are going to be on the clock. We're going to hear your 60 seconds of your second round of your story. When the timer comes on and you hear the boom, you are on the clock.
Okay. So Richard wanted to make a biography. He'd already made the bibliography. He wanted to make a biography. There was an archive of files that were the history, like basically journals and things like that, that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle had about his childhood before he published the books. Jean, his daughter, was in possession of these archives. She told Richard that she was going to leave them in her will and she would put them in the British Library. And so when that happened, he was going to go there. She wouldn't let him see them before she died. But when she died, he was going to go there and create a biography about her father. She was in agreement with that. But later, one day there was an auction, a Christie's auction in America, and those particular archived files were actually being sold at that auction. They had like his first manuscript. One of his manuscripts had never been published, a lot of other stuff, and a lot of childhood facts. And so he fought the auction. An American fought the auction the other way. The American wanted the auction to go. Richard did not. And I'll let you know what happens later.
We'll hear more in the third round. Thank you very much, Gina. Darren, what's your take on Gina's attempt at creating lexicography and using biography and bibliography?
I think it's a testament to her study in ologies, and I applaud that. So,
all right, applause for all the ologies, and generally on her story. What any thoughts?
Nothing really actually happened in the second act of her story.
Okay. We shall, with that in mind, we will move to the other. Carlos, can you give us a 10-second take on your version so far of believability of Gina's story?
I'll give you a 1 second take. False.
All right, and Matt,
Made up. There's 3 seconds. Actually irrelevant. 5 seconds. I'll cede my time to Matt.
Matt, he cedes his time to you, Matt. What's your thoughts on the feasibility so far of Gina's story? Or you can comment on Carlos's comment.
No, just focus on Gina.
Carlos's comment was fine. Gina,
Was it?
Gina, I don't know about you. Sometimes I think, as Darren said it, she's learned a lot about ologies, but I'm curious to hear about what she's learned about isms.
Oh, good. All right. She has all the ologies covered, but is she an expert on isms? Good question. So let's start and find out in the next round. But first, we are going to begin round number 3. All right. So, Gina, we're going to have you come back out, and you're going to be the first one to, with 45 seconds on the clock. As a reminder to our historians and a reminder to the audience, we're now down to the third round. So now we have 45 seconds to basically encapsulate the whole thing, wrap up the whole story. So, Gina, your story inspired by Daly, and it turns out the Daly obsession with Sherlock Holmes. Please begin when you hear the boom coming any second now.
When Richard fought the auction, he sent a note to his sister that an American kept threatening him, and he gave his sister several phone numbers and said to keep them safe. A couple of days later, he was found dead in his house. There was a shoestring that was wrapped around his neck. There was a wooden spoon, a half-empty bottle of gin, and a couple of other things that were there. The society that he belonged to that was investigating Doyle's life, they actually investigated his death, and they actually proved that he faked his own death just so that he would have this obsession of his lead into life. In fact, he held his body. He died in March, and he held his body until May 22nd, the day that Arthur Conan Doyle was born, to be buried. And they were able to figure out that he used the wooden spoon to tie it around his neck and die, just to leave clues to be known.
I'm talking.
Timers! That's ridiculous. Who's in charge of this show?
Yeah, 2 of you there.
That's on me. I saw the thing going to it, and she just kept saying one word and one word. I thought she was
going to stop.
That's my clever.
That was clever.
Very well done, Gina.
Was it clever?
That notwithstanding, for trickery notwithstanding,
I'm as angry as Carlos right now.
Yes, Darren, is her trickery of the time? Is it foreshadowing trickery of her entire story?
Well, I am very shocked to hear of an Englishman who only drank half a bottle of gin, knowing he would die that very night. That's the kind of thing Sherlock Holmes would deduce as false.
Oh, that's very good. Can I tell you a counterpoint to that?
No,
sure.
Save it.
Okay,
yeah,
I'll save it.
Save it for the end. So, Matt, what's your take on Gina's situation?
She talks too long.
Okay. Well, concisely said. All right, Carlos, let's jump in here with you. Any thoughts on here?
In addition to Matt's comment,
Yeah.
so some dude waited. They had their body there was something about a body being held back for some reason because of someone's fandom for Arthur Conan Doyle. Like, no, they didn't have fandom like that back in the day. Now they have fandom like that, but not then. Fandom wasn't that advanced at that time. Not that advanced to like make funeral arrangements around someone you like. No.
Dun, dun, dun.
Well, all right. Interesting take, Carlos. You know who is that advanced? Mr. Matt Schwemmel. Matt is going to come back out now. Matt, we're going to hear you wrap up your story, please, if you would, with your 45-second final third round.
Okay. So as you guys pointed out, they are friends now. They do get along, but that was not the case back from 2005 to about 2008. So once Colbert started his Colbert Report, it was going fine except for their relationship. And their studios were close together. That's just kind of the way it worked out. Not for any other reason. That's just where they found space. However, so it was a bad blood between them. Writers would go back and forth as far as like they'd work for him for a while, work for the other for a while. It got so bad that Viacom contacted Comedy Central. They own Comedy Central and said, maybe we need to bring in another host for The Daily Show because a lot of it was on Stewart's side. And they thought about even bringing back Craig Kilborn, but they didn't.
Wow. Okay.
And I ran out of time, so I stopped talking.
Yeah, if he was more pink, you would have kept on going, okay?
No.
Okay, all right.
You're the buzzer, that's when you stop.
Yeah,
that's what I did, but then that was more pink.
Well, Darren, step on in here, Darren, and let us hear your thoughts on
it's absolutely
the late
true.
night award.
It's absolutely true. They did not bring back Craig Kilborn.
I
think history shows that because it's Noah Trevor is the host of The Daily Show, and I don't think you could mistake those two for each other.
No,
that's
honestly.
correct. No, that's correct. All right, Carlos, any thoughts, Carlos, on Matt's story?
I find it very hard to believe that Comedy Central would ever consider bringing back Craig Kilborn to replace Jon Stewart, given the differences in the styles of their show and the audience appreciation increase that Stewart brought to the table.
That's an interesting point. Stewart did catapult the popularity of that time slot tremendously. Gina, what say you?
I'm with him. Nobody likes Craig Kilborn.
Okay.
I'm sorry, dude. I'm sorry. Not for that role. Maybe you're lovely in other things.
Okay. Well, they did have him drive off a bridge in another movie.
Did you see that? Did you see that? I got another clock. Was I supposed to?
No, you did not.
There it is again. Am I the only one seeing this?
No, you did not. All right, but Gina, we do still need to hear your conclusion of your story.
Oh, no, I concluded it. I was just going to say that he drank, he was known to be a wine connoisseur, and after drinking wine, he would not ruin his palate with any other type of liquor.
You just gave her more time.
No, Carlos.
You gave her more time.
All right, Gina, thank you so much.
But come on.
We have a host and a judge
Carlos, let's get
and
Carlos
two
up.
guests,
Carlos, come up
and
on.
you gave
Carlos,
her
come
more
up here.
time.
All right, Carlos. We did that just for your benefit. So now you, sir, have the opportunity to conclude your story because you are about to get your clock on screen. You're going to hear the boom, and you're going to tell us the conclusion of your story.
All right.
There it is.
Okay, so first week, everything is already a poop show, okay? But commuters are blurry-eyed. They're waking up in the dark. The New York Times is calling it the second dark ages because they're being glib. It's pitch black at 7:30 in the morning. They thought if this happened 2 years ago, Nixon, you wouldn't even be president right now. That's how much of a screw up it is. But then stuff got to get real because people started to get hit by cars early in the morning. And the thing is, there was a report that was done that said, no, this is the same average of people getting hit by cars as it was in January. But you know how politics and news is. It went from 74% to 42%, and they ended it in 2 months. 2 months, done. Back to normal.
back to normal in 2 months. Darren, did Carlos's story come back to normal for you at the end?
I'm still having a hard time getting my head around 42% of Americans agreeing on anything. Really, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And I want to say, like, a poop show sounds horrible. Like, if you went for a peep show, but it was a poop show instead. And I can imagine why you'd be blurry-eyed after that.
Cups are present.
He intended to peep, but he sometimes had to poop. You can't sometimes control those things. It just happens. Matt, what say you on Carlos's finale there?
I think he could be telling the truth, but also I think he's lying. I mean,
Okay.
I feel like this is not an experiment that Americans would take. I think we don't change things so easily. If we're like, we got daylight savings, let's get rid of it.
Okay.
Even though, should we? Yes, of course we should.
We are.
Yeah.
We're getting rid of it. It's happening.
Gina, come back on screen, please, Gina. And is there any more of your story? No, I'm kidding. What do you think of Carlos's story?
Actually, I think it's interesting, and I'm going to talk that whole time. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's interesting. So I'm not sure if Carlos is telling the truth or not, and because I do agree, Viacom should not. That was probably not true that they wanted to ask Craig Kilborn back, but at the same time, Carlos used the same excuse that Tesla used when all their cars crashed. They were like, well, statistically, it was still the same amount of crashes. And so I just think he's like totally bogarting a quote from the Tesla documentary that just came out. So I don't know. I think he might be lying too. This is hard for me because I know I'm not lying, but at the end of the day,
this is a tough one because statistically, each of you have made the same argument that you would have made 2 years ago. So I'm not sure exactly what one to believe. So let's get. We've heard all three rounds now from all three historians. Let's get Darren back on screen. And Darren, now I'm going to put you in the hot seat for a half a second here, and we're going to ask you, Darren, to determine. Just give us. Are you leaning towards any one of them as being the bluffer?
I have to say I'm leaning towards Matt because just Stephen Colbert is not the kind of guy to hold a grudge that long against a guy as nice as Jon Stewart. He's also a nice guy. So
just
going based on my guts that I love both of those guys.
Yeah, based on your gut. Okay, interesting take. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have you all think about the stories that you've heard, think about the points that Darren's made, and see, if you determine which of our historians are bluffing and which are telling the truth. Again, we had Carlos with his story on daylight savings time. We had Matt with the tumult of the Daily Show. And we had Gina with the guy named Richard with the daily obsession of Sherlock Holmes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Darren and myself, we're going to step off real quick, and we're going to have the reveal now of which of our panelists are telling the truth and which one is going to be the history bluff. I'm going to hand it over to our host, Adam, our tech, Adam.
All right, I'll take it from here. So, the time has come to determine and reveal, because I and I alone know who was the bluff. Could it have been Matt? Or could it have been Gina? Or perhaps it was even Carlos? I'm going to tell you right now, the person this whole time who was bluffing you was Matt! He was the bluff the whole time.
Yep.
How dare you besmirch the good names of Colbert and Carell and Stewart?
I will besmirch the heck out of them. They'll be so smirched. Oh.
You guys,
all right.
Thank
you so much.
With James Harvey is really funny. Stephen Colbert and Steve Carell.
Yeah, nice finish there, Gina. I want to just say you all did a phenomenal job with your stories, and once again, tremendously thank Darren for debuting the judge role for us and determining who possibly could be the bluff. So Carlos, Matt, Gina, and Darren, thank you all. And to everyone listening, thank you so much for listening to another episode of History Buffs. Once again, I'm going to turn it back over to our tech, Adam.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. We hope you come and tune in again for more History Bluffs, where truth is stranger than fiction.